Good morning and welcome back, everyone, to our second session of today. This is Art and Code Homemade, and I'm delighted to welcome you to a presentation by Lajeunesse McMillian. This is Lajeunesse' second Art and Code. Lajeunesse presented at the 2016 Art and Code called Weird Reality, which was all about new and independent visions for augmented and virtual realities. Lajeunesse is a new media artist, maker, and creative technologist based in Maryland and New York. Their work integrates performance, virtual reality, and physical computing to create intersectional media systems that support the needs of suppressed communities. Lajeunesse McMillian.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Lajeunesse and I'm a new media artist. And yeah, I've been doing this work now for about 7 years, integrating performance with augmented and virtual reality experiences, as well as installation art. And I started this work as part of my time at NYU Tandon's integrated digital media program. After I left the program, I realized that my access to a lot of these technologies was very limited. And it made me question access just in general to all of these different technologies. So yeah, in the past few years, access to motion capture data, 3D character-based models, and software to make animation yourself has skyrocketed from MakeHuman to Mixamo to Carnegie Mellon's motion capture database. The ability to make and finish polished projects has become easier for many. And while these resources are extremely helpful to create a range of projects, they lack tools to create diverse characters and movements unexplored by systems that center assumptions of neutrality. And so I decided to start the Black Movement Library, which started as an online database of Black motion capture data and Black character-based models. But I realized that my approach to creating the space was not necessarily correct, mainly because representation is not enough. I did not want to perpetuate systems of harm on our bodies and on our movements and how we move in the space. So I needed to start to question what it means to be seen in these digital spaces and what it means to be liberated in these spaces as well. And yeah, so we first need to understand how our movements and bodies are already represented in the media and in the tools that we use. And this is just a quote from We Need to Talk About Digital Blackface, and I'll just read it out. Um, I'll just read out actually like from the half to the bottom. Many of our most beloved entertainment genres owe at least part of themselves to the minstrel stage, including vaudeville, film, and cartoons. While often associated with Jim Crow era racism, the tenets of minstrel performance remain alive today in television, movies, music, and its most advanced iteration on the internet. So yeah, so digital blackface is essentially an evolution, an evolved version of blackface that's seen in a lot of different like social media platforms, but also in a lot of different tools that I'll show. But yeah, while I started creating, during like the first few months that I started creating this space, in 2018, lawsuits were filed against Fortnite for using dances from mainly Black creators without permission, compensation, or credit. So the Millie Rock became the Swipe It, the Carlton became the Fresh, effectively erasing the origins of these dances. However, currently lawsuits are on pause because the dances are not considered choreography under copyright law. And so yeah, so that's essentially how it's seen in video games. A lot of these dances can be bought on the platform and then applied to characters of various different races. So it just sort of like really has this question of what it means to erase the origins of a dance or of like a community of creators. But yeah, but blackface is also seen in memes and GIFs, like on Twitter, but and also in its most recent iteration on TikTok, where a lot of different white creators have stolen different dance phrases from Black creatives on the platform. And while they're getting a lot of different just like promotion and a lot of different opportunities from these stolen dances, a lot of the different Black creators and Black activists on these same platforms are silenced and surveilled at just like really wild rates. So yeah, so that's in social media space, but also there are like different tools that don't necessarily show us also. And in this back picture GIF, there's this is a GIF of of the dancer that I was working with doing this like hip hop dance like in this database. So this is actually Mixamo, and Mixamo is a free database that you can use. I do recommend that folks who are interested in getting into animation use this tool. However, when you're looking for culturally specific movements in these existing motion capture databases, you may find some, but are often met with dances and movements that don't reflect the search terms. So like in the back there, the character is doing a hip hop dance, but clearly that's not hip hop dancing. So it's like, what's going on? But also in the name of making it easy to use, these tools often omit valuable information from the users, including information about the motion capture actor who provided the movement and important historical and cultural information about the movements performed. And this is another example of a character creation software that I use called FaceGen, which also attaches, which is a plugin for DAZ 3D. And essentially, it's really good for recompiling faces by uploading your pictures to the space. However, you can see on the right here, with all of these different sliders, there are a lot of problems that arise. You can see that at the bottom half here, they've reduced a lot. They've created a lot of different problematic sliders for African, East Asian, South Asian, and European. So basically, like, you know, I have a lot of questions around what software, like where did they get this information from for like, this is what makes you look more quote unquote African or more East Asian or more South Asian or more European? Where are you getting this information from? And also, how can you sort of like take all of this range of data for all of the different ways that somebody can look, a person can look into one slider. But also, interesting enough, you can also see that as the features become darker in skin tone, they also associate that with feminine, quote unquote, feminine and masculine characteristics of the face. So you can sort of see like how these biases are implemented way more clearly than in a lot of different other softwares when it comes to how software developers see the body, see our faces and how we are. And so, yeah, the common thread of these examples is the oversimplification of Black people, our stories, and our lives. And this is really a network of systems that quantify and degrade our humanity in order to capitalize off of our existence and being. And so how do we combat that, the exploitation, the erasure, and the dilution of our culture and of our people? And what do the cultural reparations look like? Black movement does not only represent our individual experiences, but it also represents our collective memory, transcending space, time, and white supremacist social structures. It allows us to connect to each other, our ancestors, our deepest selves, and gives us a space to communicate to our future. Black movement is also a technology holding the stories of our existence across the diaspora. And our stories and bodies are more than data points and avatars. They hold our humanity. And so it's time for digital spaces and all of the physical spaces that we enter to reflect that. So yeah, I just ended up having way more questions than answers. What does it mean to ethically digitize our movement? How can it better serve and celebrate the community? And how can we effectively challenge digital tools and landscapes that don't share these values and gain liberation over our collective future? In Black performance theory, Dr. Nadine George Graves defined diasporic spidering as the multi-directional process by which people of African descent define their lives, the lifelong ontological gathering of information by going out into the world and coming back to the self. She does this by drawing connections to the evolving folklore of Anansi, to how Google and other search engines use web crawlers to find and organize new information for their growing databases. So basically taking this idea of diasporic spidering, the Black Movement Library is a space for activists, performers, and artists to create diverse extended reality projects, a space to research how and why we move, and an archive of our existence. And we seek to grow this community through the use of performances, a various amount of XR experiences, workshops, conversations, and tool making. And so, yeah, so basically, last year, I started with creating a performance series, which started with Nala Duma and Ronaldo Luis, where we used the perception neuron suit and Unreal Engine to essentially create these movement portrait landscapes. And I'm going to show you a video of what happened. However, essentially, they both, I did interviews with them both. And through those interviews about their movement journeys, I embedded those into the soundscapes that they performed to. And I did all this work at as part of a residency at Barbarian Group. And I'm going to show a movement portrait that came from that. So it first started as a live performance. So there was a live performance with live projections, but I'm just going to show the movement portrait, which is a 2D representation of all of the movements from that performance.
I produce, write, perform music. R&B, hip hop, pop music through an experimental electronic kind of lens. The root of my art, it's very black, black music, black art. My whole family side. I was the only one born in the United States. They all speak Zulu. That's another thing I want to before I die. I think I was 10 years, but my dad is like, sports, more active. I did soccer.
Yeah, and just in the interest of time, I'm just gonna go back to the presentation. But yeah, they're both 10-minute long pieces for both Nala and Ronaldo. And essentially you're just learning about their movement journeys, and you're learning about their movement journeys both through their own words, but also through their movements as well. And yeah, so they're seen as both a live performance and a docuseries. And basically over 4 months, I was just learning about their movement journeys and practices. And this translation, I do want to go over this. Like, this translation into a portrait allows the movement to be re-represented as an abstract digital memory of the performance day. And over the course of the year, I sat with the data, relearning both Nala and Ronaldo through their movement and interviews, reconstructing and diving into the visual process as its own ritual. How do we translate digital representations of the self in others? And that brings me into the workshop series that I've been developing for the past 2 years now, called Understanding, Transforming, and Preserving Movement in Digital Spaces, which is a workshop to learn about extended reality tools in relationship to race, gender, and culture. And it's been a traveling workshop, and I've hosted it at IBEAM, Afrotectopia, Pioneer Works, Barbarian Group, Barnard College, City College, and PBS POV. And now it has an online version where I'm helping folks find all of these different softwares online. Because we can't use any different motion capture software tools, we're actually using Deep Motion, which is a AI powered, I'm gonna move this, I don't know if y'all can see this, but it's an online based motion capture, AI powered motion capture database where you can upload videos of yourself, as long as it's a full body video capture of you. It can recompile, it can use algorithms to recompile your movements into 3D animations. And yeah, and that brings me to the last thing that I wanted to talk about, which was Antidote. And this was a project in collaboration with Marguerite Hemmings. And we essentially created new portals of care using Zoom, but also motion capture and Unreal Engine. And we were also able to collaborate with Reina Anakwe, Saloma Isega, and Amber Starks. And we got a beautiful different soundscape and a really beautiful digital land acknowledgement from there. And I'll just read this last part, and then I'll show you a clip of that. So yeah, antidote is an offering and a prayer. It's an interruption, hacking, a portal, a medicine, a ritual response, and physical undoing of the lie that we are not our own and that we are not free. And oops, I just wanted to show a portion of this. And this is Salome Asega's part of the digital
Antidote is online and away from keyboard, a place that cultivates networks of care to conceal and protect each other from that tries to eat us, devour us, make us consumable bits of information to trade. A place where ones and zeros make a loose bedrock, and what really holds the foundation for our gathering in this virtual place is our innate illegible technologies. Here, technology is not just an extension of the body, but also an assemblage of tools that have been passed down and inherited for us to mesh and knit our survival, pleasure, and growth. Antidote is where we champion our Black collectivity and unbox the black box. It is a place for healing. The internet is full of sharp edges. There are plenty of places to get cut and nicked. Look at your scrolling fingertips. Do you see notches? I have cuts from seeing Black Gloss go viral on platforms that thrive on the spectacle of us. Antidote is cultivating a new place for Black creativity, how we move, how we be, our cool, that thing, our history, our future, the story of us. Our resilience has always been our way forward and our way back. Antidote calls for abolition. We are in a nook of the virtual that springs from a knowing that we can no longer be an afterthought or special consideration to an existing information infrastructure that didn't consider us from the outset, or pretends not to see us but collects us as dark data. Antidote is tired of digital inclusion as amendment. The problems of technology cannot be solved with more technology. Antidote is restorative. Before Silicon Valley's advance to invent our future for us, before the 18th century Spanish missions in the region, the Ohlone were stewards of an abundant Northern California rich in animal and plant life. 500 years after the Ohlone were alpha caretakers, big tech occupies the land and prioritizes profit to the point of overturning a site from resource-rich to resource-intensive. And like a germ, the depletion spreads because we've built global dependence on this U.S. construction. Finding our way back to abundance is urgent. Repatriation and the redistribution of money and resources are urgent. Decolonization is not a metaphor, but the antidote. Antidote is consentful. There are no terms and conditions here because service is not monopolized, but upon each of us. Power and responsibility are distributed. Remember, we have the tools in us to architect better ways to hold each other.
Yeah, and I'll stop there for that one. And yeah, I guess the last thing that I just want to say is that this library is a movement that celebrates our history, our culture, and that serves our community to learn and grow as society evolves. And it holds us accountable in the ways we deal with Black people, our movements, our bodies, and our lives. And I'll stop the share now because I wanted to also show basically just like how I've been like making animations. Basically, I'm wearing the perception neuron suit here, and this background space is where I've been animating myself, doing all of these movements. And I was just going to share my screen to like Axis Neuron. Essentially, like my body's all like really bad right now, but essentially, like I would go through like a calibration series, and yeah, I've been doing mocap, like using the perception neuron suit in my living room. So yeah, I think like that's like where I wanted to like end things. Like thank you all like so much for like listening to and like sharing the space with me. If there are any questions, I guess like we can do that now.
Hi, Lajane. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. It was a great talk. I have a question, which is an aspect of what homemade is now. You know, the digital homemade or the neo homemade is, you know, making things for oneself, one's friends, family, and community. And your Black Movement Library is clearly, coming from your community and back to its community. Maybe you, like I saw that sort of Christmas time or New Year's video from Boston Dynamics, the robot folks who had made these dancing robots that were clearly appropriating traditional Black dance movements from, the 20th century. And we see Black dance, Black movement continually reappropriated, often without credit. Now, in robots even. And these are likely robots, I think, in a particularly ghoulish way, which are almost like proto-cops that are going to be suppressing Black lives. I guess my question for you is, in making a Black Movement Library, presumably, from a community and for a community, you're distilling movements and also making them repurposable in a way. And there's a risk that in making them repurposable, it's going to come out of your control, and which is good and bad, right? I mean, you want people to use it in ways you couldn't have planned, but you also want to see it used in ways that are ethical and responsible to the material. How do you make sure that, you don't have dancing cop robots who are using your library?
Yeah, I guess, and I guess that's also like why I changed my approach to the library space. Like, I think like in the beginning, I was very much just interested in having, just like a data set and database of this stuff. But I realized that like really early on that I didn't want to be someone who was like perpetuating that space. Like, we have a long history of exploitation of like Black people. Like, that's literally like, hashtag slavery, like, that is like the basis of America. And so all that I can do is make sure that I am, contributing to stewarding and working in spaces that are trying to or working towards abolition, like, and what it means to abolish those ways of thinking about how we treat people, our bodies, and like what our bodies can be and what our bodies can produce. Creating and not even creating, but yes, like working to uncover and to rediscover and reestablish like our connections to our own humanity. Like, what does that look like? We're living in a lot of different systems right now: white supremacy, patriarchy, imperialism, all of the isms, right? And all of those isms really contribute to all of us, dehumanizing ourselves in order to fit into capitalism, to like fit into a systems that like commodify our bodies in ways that make it hard for us to humanize ourselves and to humanize each other. So what does it mean to create spaces and to reestablish those spaces, steward those spaces where that's not the case, So that's really what I'm interested in, like, I think that like that shift from like database and seeing ourselves as just data and seeing ourselves as human, as people who hold like so much information, and trying to like, and I guess like the expansion from database to library allows space for us to be in many ways in that space. It allows us to like really care for ourselves and care for each other in that space, and to really see ourselves and to see each other in that space too. So I'm really interested in, and I guess like that's like, the basis of the research that I've been like, I guess like developing and working with in the latest iteration of Understanding, Transforming, and Preserving Movement in Digital Spaces. We did a lot of like movement work. So we did a lot of like witnessing activities where we were mirroring each other over Zoom. And then we were basically we were given, I gave everyone prompts to define their movement, to define each other's movement, and to really think about, how those movements make you feel. Last thing with this, I've been really thinking about what it means to transition from motion capture to motion witnessing. I feel like the term capture is so, it has just like really problematic, like just like a really problematic, like, etymology, like, this idea of capturing something, of owning something, like, what does it mean to really like, transform that into something new and different? And so, yeah, so basically the space, the library space, I don't own it. I'm a steward of the space. I'm a caretaker of the space. And I am trying to cultivate and help other folks like come into the space. And through that, we're all having to do this work of decolonizing and decommodifying our bodies.
Thank you. This notion of motion witnessing and of the decommodification of movement data is really, I think, at this new essence of the Neo Homemade. With that, I have to close this. Thank you so much, LaJaunie. In about 4 minutes, we'll pick it up with Hannah Perner Wilson. And so everyone, stay tuned. Thanks so much.
Thank you.